Let me start by making something very clear. Health is never a one-size-fits-all approach. We often believe that if something works for one person, it should work for us too. If your friend tries the keto diet and loses a lot of weight, you might think, great, I'll do the same thing and get the same results. But that's not how it works. Every single body is unique, like a fingerprint. Each person has a different chemistry, different needs, and a different way of responding to food, exercise, and even stress. That's why personalized health strategies are so important. They mean that instead of following the latest trend or generalized advice, you take into account your own genetics, your own lifestyle, your own environment, and your own personal history. That's where true health begins. Think about it. Even within the same household, two children may have very different health needs. One child can drink milk and feel completely fine, while the other drinks the same milk and develops bloating, stomach pain, or skin issues. Does that mean milk is bad? No, it means that one child's body processes it differently than the others. The problem arises when we generalize and assume that because something is healthy for one person, it must be healthy for everyone. Now, let's talk about genes. We all carry a genetic blueprint. Some of us have genes that increase the risk for high cholesterol. Some of us carry genes that increase the risk for diabetes, and others may have genes that predispose us to Alzheimer's disease. But here's the key. Just because you carry the blueprint doesn't mean the outcome is fixed. It's like having a map. It shows the possible routes, but it doesn't decide which road you'll actually take. What determines that? Your choices, your food, your lifestyle, your sleep, your exercise, and even how you handle stress. This is where epigenetics comes in. Epigenetics is the science that shows us how our choices and environment can literally switch our genes on or off. Think of your genes like the words in a book. They're all written down, but whether you read those pages or leave them closed depends on your actions. Your daily choices, what you eat, how much you move, whether you sleep well, these are like the switches that determine which genes are activated and which ones stay silent. That's incredibly powerful. For example, if you carry genes that increase your risk for type 2 diabetes, that doesn't mean you are destined to develop it. If you eat a diet rich in whole foods, avoid processed sugar, stay active, sleep deeply, and manage your stress, you can keep that gene switch turned off. In other words, your genes may load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger, or keeps it from being pulled at all. That realization changes everything. It means we are not victims of our biology. We are the architects of our health. Now, what does this mean practically? It means learning to listen to the language of your body. Your body is constantly giving you signals about what works and what doesn't. One person drinks coffee and feels energized, alert, and focused. Another person drinks coffee and immediately feels anxious, restless, with a racing heart, and they can't sleep at night. Is coffee good or bad? That's the wrong question. The right question is coffee good or bad for me? Personalized health is about asking that question again and again in different areas of your life. It's about noticing how different foods affect you. Do you feel energized after eating, or do you feel sluggish and heavy? Do you digest smoothly, or do you feel bloated and uncomfortable? These observations matter. Yet most of us ignore them. We trust advertisements or diet books telling us what's healthy and assume it must apply universally. Whoa. And there is no universally perfect food or diet. There is only what works for you. The problem we face today is that we live in a generalized world when it comes to health. Doctors often follow the same standard protocol for everyone. If your blood pressure is high, you get the same pill as the next person. If your blood sugar is high, you get the same prescription for insulin or tablets. If your cholesterol is up, you get the same statin as millions of others. And people assume that's just the way it is, that medicine is about one-size-fits-all solutions. But if you look deeper, you'll see that every patient's story is unique, and every patient's body responds differently. Personalized health is about understanding that the same disease can have completely different causes in different people. Two people may both have type 2 diabetes, but one developed it because of a poor diet high in refined carbs, while the other developed it from chronic stress and lack of sleep. Should they both be treated in the exact same way? Of course not. Yet that's exactly what the conventional system often does. And this problem isn't just in medicine, it's everywhere, especially in the world of food. Diet trends rise and fall like fashion. Keto becomes popular, then paleo, then vegan, then intermittent fasting. Each one is marketed as the best diet for everyone. But here's the truth. There is no one diet that works universally. Science has proven this. A fascinating study was done where researchers gave hundreds of people the exact same food, a simple slice of bread, for example, and then measured their blood sugar response. You'd think the response would be the same, right? But the results were shockingly different. One person's blood sugar barely moved, while another person's spiked dramatically. Same food, completely different reaction. That's the power of individuality. So the question isn't, is this diet good or bad? The real question is this diet good or bad for me? And that changes everything. Let's take an example. Someone tries keto and feels amazing, loses weight, energy soars, brain fog disappears. Another person tries the exact same keto diet and feels worse, low energy, poor digestion, mood swings, and irritability. Does that mean keto is bad? No. It just means keto wasn't right for that individual. Every body has its own metabolism, its own genetic variations, and its own needs. And then you add in lifestyle factors, and things become even more complex. Two people can eat the exact same meal, but their outcomes will differ based on their sleep, stress, and physical activity. One person is relaxed, well-rested, and active, so the meal fuels their body in a positive way. The other person is stressed, sleep-deprived, and sedentary, so the same meal might raise their blood sugar, increase fat storage, and leave them feeling sluggish. Food is never just food. It interacts with your context, with your lifestyle, with your unique biology. This principle applies in fitness too. We often hear blanket statements like weightlifting is best or cardio is king. But the truth is, it depends on the person. For one individual, weight training might build lean muscle and boost metabolism. For another, the same training could cause joint pain, elevated stress hormones, or burnout. Personalized health means discovering what your body responds best to. We see this confusion with so-called superfoods as well. Blueberries, for instance, are often praised as antioxidant powerhouses. For most people, that's true. They provide tremendous benefits. But if someone has fructose intolerance, those same blueberries might cause digestive distress. Turmeric is another example. It's celebrated for its anti-inflammatory properties, and for many, it's a powerful healing spice. Yet I've seen patients who experience acid reflux every time they consume turmeric. So is it a superfood? For some, yes. For others, no. Again, the right question isn't, is it good? Is it good for me? Hair loss is one of those things that doesn't just affect your appearance. It directly affects your confidence. Every morning when you stand in front of the mirror and notice that your hairline has crept back just a little further, or when you run your hand through your hair and see more strands than you'd like to, there's this sinking feeling inside. It's not just about vanity, it's about identity. Hair is deeply tied to how we see ourselves. For many people, it represents youth, vitality, strength, and even attractiveness. So when it starts to thin or fall out, it feels like you're slowly losing a piece of who you are. The most frustrating part is the helplessness. You try new shampoos, you apply oils, you listen to every friend or relative who suggests some miracle home remedy, onion juice, coconut oil, expensive serums. At first, you have hope. You want to believe that something simple will fix it. But when none of it works, you begin to feel hopeless. You start thinking maybe this is just genetics and there's nothing you can do. You tell yourself, my father lost his hair, so of course I will too. And yes, genetics play a role, but they are not the final verdict. What most people don't realize is that your environment, your hormones, and your daily lifestyle choices often have more influence on whether your hair actually stays or falls. Think of your body as a finely tuned machine. Inside, there's a complex system of hormones, nutrients, and blood flow, all working in balance. As long as that balance is maintained, everything runs smoothly. But the moment that balance gets disturbed, the effects start showing up, sometimes in your energy levels, sometimes in your skin, and very often in your hair. And here's something important. For the body, growing hair is not a survival priority. It's more like a luxury project. If nutrients are scarce, if your liver is overloaded, or if your stress hormones are too high, the body will simply decide we don't have the resources to keep us. Keep hair growth going, let's use that energy somewhere more critical. That's why hair follicles go into what's called a dormant or resting phase. They don't die, but they stop producing the strong, thick strands they once did. This is why I always say hair loss is not just a surface level issue. It's not just about the scalp. It's an indicator of something deeper going on inside. Think of it as a warning light on the dashboard of your car. When that light flashes, you don't just put tape over it and keep driving, you check the engine. Yet that's what most people do with hair loss. They cover it up with cosmetic fixes, shampoos, transplants, steroids, while ignoring the engine problem inside the body. If you truly want to reverse hair loss, you have to focus on the root causes, and one of the biggest culprits is hormonal imbalance, especially the hormone called DHT. I'll get into that in more detail later, but before we go there, you need to understand something fundamental. Reversing hair loss requires a mindset shift. It's not about quick fixes. It's about healing from the inside out. Now let's also address the psychological side. Hair loss isn't just a cosmetic issue. It impacts your self-esteem in a very real way. When your hair starts thinning, you don't just lose hair, you lose confidence. You begin to avoid social gatherings. You hesitate to take photos. Some people start hiding behind hats or hoodies. And little by little, that habit of hiding chips away at their personality. It kills their confidence. It affects relationships, career opportunities, and overall quality of life. That's why I say hair loss has to be seen as more than just hair. It's connected to your overall health and your mental well-being. There's also a cultural pressure that makes things worse. In almost every society, thick, shiny hair is seen as a sign of beauty and health. So when one loses hair, people notice. They make comments, sometimes as jokes, sometimes out of pity. And these small remarks build up in your mind and make you feel even more insecure. But here's the truth. The solution doesn't lie in hiding or masking. It lies in understanding what your body is trying to tell you. Hair loss is not punishment. It's communication. Your body is saying something inside needs to be corrected. Once you shift your perspective and see it as a signal instead of a sentence, you can begin the real process of recovery. The first step on this journey is awareness. Awareness that hair loss is not an isolated surface problem. It's a sign that something deeper is off. The sooner you recognize this, the sooner you can take action. And when you start addressing the real underlying issues, your hormones, your nutrients, your liver health, you'll begin to notice changes. Your hair follicles are not dead. In most cases, they're simply inactive. And with the right environment, they can wake up again. That's the moment when you realize, yes, reversing hair loss is possible. Not through wishful thinking, not through magic products, but through taking back control of your health from the inside out. So let's talk about the first and biggest root cause of hair loss, hormones. Most people think stress is the number one reason for losing hair. And yes, stress does play a role. It creates inflammation, it affects circulation, it throws your whole system off. But if you really zoom in on the science, the main villain for most men, and many women too, is something called DHT, or dihydrotestosterone. Now here's what happens. Your body produces testosterone, which is completely normal and healthy. Testosterone itself is not the problem. It's essential for energy, muscle mass, mood, and overall vitality. But a portion of that testosterone gets converted into DHT by an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. And that's where the trouble begins. DHT is a much more potent hormone than testosterone. When it rises beyond what your body can handle, it starts attacking your hair follicles. It doesn't kill them outright, it shrinks them. Imagine your hair follicle is like a healthy tree. Normally it produces thick branches, strong leaves, but when DHT keeps binding to the follicle over and over, it's like the soil around the tree gets tighter, more compact. The roots don't get the same nutrients or oxygen. Slowly the tree gets smaller, weaker, until it only produces thin, fragile branches. That's what happens to your hair. It becomes thinner, lighter, weaker, until eventually it's so tiny you can hardly see it. But here's the good news. This process is reversible, especially if you catch it before the follicle is completely shut down. Now, most people, when they hear about DHT, immediately jump toward medications, finasteride, minoxidil, or other drugs. And sure, those might temporarily slow down hair loss, but they come with a list of side effects: low libido, mood changes, and even long-term hormonal disruptions. My approach, and what I want you to consider, is controlling DHT naturally by supporting your body's own balance instead of forcing it with drugs. Let's break it down. Why does your body start overproducing DHT in the first place? It's rarely random. Most of the time, it's triggered by your liver health, insulin levels, and overall inflammation. Think about it. Your liver is the organ that filters and metabolizes hormones. If your liver is sluggish because of fatty liver, excess sugar, alcohol, or processed foods, then your hormone balance is automatically thrown off. Testosterone doesn't flow smoothly, estrogen doesn't flow smoothly, and the conversion to DHT becomes exaggerated. So when people try to fix hair loss by just rubbing things on their scalp, they're missing the much bigger picture. The problem is happening deep inside, not just on the surface. Let me give you a simple analogy. Imagine you have a factory P producing different products. Testosterone is one of those products. But in your factory, one particular assembly line, the one producing DHT, starts working overtime. It keeps pumping out more and more while the other lines are lagging behind. If you don't fix the factory's management system, you can't fix the overproduction. And in this case, that management system is your diet and lifestyle. Diet plays a bigger role than most people realize. Sugar, refined carbs, and seed oils are major contributors to this problem. They create insulin resistance, which means your body is pumping out higher levels of insulin to manage blood sugar. High insulin levels are directly linked to higher levels of DHT production. It's a chain reaction. That's why so many people who switch to low-carb or intermittent fasting often notice improvements in hair health, not just weight loss. Because by reducing insulin, they're indirectly reducing excess DHT. Now let's talk about stress for a moment, because while DHT is the main player, stress acts like fuel on the fire. Stress increases cortisol, which in turn raises inflammation and worsens hormonal imbalances. When cortisol is constantly elevated, your body shifts into survival mode. And again, what's the first luxury project it cuts back on? Hair. Because for survival, you don't need shiny, thick hair. You need energy, blood flow, and glucose for your vital organs. So the body reroutes resources away from hair growth. That's why people going through stressful phases, exams, divorce, financial struggles, often notice their hair shedding much faster. But here's something most people overlook: blood circulation. Your hair follicles need oxygen and nutrients delivered through tiny blood vessels called capillaries. If your insulin resistance is high, those capillaries get damaged and circulation weakens. That means even if you're eating all the right nutrients, your follicles might not be receiving them. This is another reason why lifestyle changes like improving insulin sensitivity and reducing inflammation make such a huge difference in reversing hair loss. So the key point here is this: the enemy is not your genetics. The enemy is the environment you're creating inside your body. If you keep feeding the DHT production line with sugar, processed food, stress, and liver overload, your hair will continue to thin. But if you clean up your diet, support your liver, balance your hormones, and lower insulin, you can change the environment. And when the environment changes, your hair follicles begin to recover. I want you to really let this sink in. Your hair follicles are not dead. They are still alive, but they've been weakened, starved, and suffocated by an internal imbalance. By reducing DHT naturally and restoring balance, you can give them a second chance. It's not overnight. It takes patience. But the body has an incredible ability to heal itself when you remove the blocks. Now let's take a step back and look at hair loss in a way that's a little easier to visualize. Think of your hair follicles like tiny plants growing in soil. For a plant to thrive, it needs clean soil, water, sunlight, and the right nutrients. If the soil is polluted, the water is toxic, or the sunlight is blocked, the plant doesn't die instantly, but it becomes weaker, it dries out, and eventually it stops growing new leaves. Your hair works in exactly the same way. The soil for your hair is your internal environment, your diet, your hormones, your circulation. If that soil is filled with toxins from junk food, refined sugar, and processed oils, the follicle is living in a polluted environment. Over time, it loses its ability to grow strong, thick strands. That's why you'll notice your hair becoming thinner and more fragile long before it actually falls out. And most people make the mistake of treating the hair directly instead of treating the soil. They're watering the leaves, so to speak. We, in the roots, are the real problem. Let's talk about some of the biggest toxins in that soil. Number one is refined carbohydrates, things like white. Let's talk about some of the biggest toxins in that soil. Number one is refined carbohydrates, things like white bread, pastries, sugary drinks, and all the packaged snacks most people eat daily. These foods spike your insulin levels again and again. Over time, this leads to insulin resistance, which not only raises DHT but also damages the tiny capillaries that supply blood to your hair follicles. Imagine cutting off half the water supply to a plant. It won't die right away, but the growth slows, the leaves shrink, and the whole plant becomes weaker. That's exactly what happens to your hair when circulation is compromised. Then we have processed vegetable oils. Seed oils like soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil. These oils are inflammatory. They create oxidative stress in your body, which damages your cells and your hormones. If you're constantly consuming fast food, fried food, or anything with these oils, you're essentially feeding poison into your soil. And remember, the body prioritizes survival. When inflammation is high, your system diverts resources toward protecting your vital organs, not toward growing thick hair. Now let's add another layer, nutrient deficiencies. Think about plants again. If the soil doesn't contain enough minerals, the plant can't thrive. Your hair follicles are the same. They need zinc, biotin, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, and especially proteins from amino acids to build keratin, which is the main structure of hair. But here's the catch. Even if you're eating these nutrients, if your digestive system and liver aren't working properly, you might not actually be absorbing them. So the follicles are starving, not because you aren't feeding them, but because your body isn't delivering those nutrients to the right place. This is why simply popping supplements doesn't always solve the problem. You might take biotin or vitamin pills, but if your liver is congested or your insulin resistance is blocking blood flow, those nutrients aren't making it to your hair. It's like pouring water into a bucket full of holes. The water never reaches the roots. That's why the foundation, your diet and lifestyle, must be fixed first. Now let's shift gears and talk about something positive. When you clean up your soil, when you reduce sugar, eliminate processed oils, and start eating whole nutrient-rich foods, you create the perfect environment for your follicles to recover. Think of it like turning dry, cracked soil into fertile ground again. Suddenly the plant that was withering now has the chance to grow new leaves. In your body, the same thing happens. Your follicles start producing thicker strands again. One of the most powerful tools here is intermittent fasting. I talk about this a lot because it doesn't just help with weight loss, it also restores balance at a cellular level. When you fast, your insulin levels drop. That alone reduces the excess production of DHT and lowers inflammation. But fasting also triggers something called autophagy, where your body begins cleaning up damaged cells and tissues, including in the skin and scalp. This creates a healthier environment for new growth. Another key is liver health. Your liver is your master filter. It detoxifies your blood, processes hormones, and ensures that nutrients are delivered where they're needed. If your liver is overloaded with sugar, alcohol, or toxins, it simply cannot keep up. That's why supporting liver function is so critical for hair health. Eating cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, kale, and Brussels sprouts, adding lemon water, and cutting back on alcohol, all of these free up your liver to do its job better. When the liver is working well, your hormones balance naturally, and your follicles get the nutrients they need. Now, some people ask, if I start making these changes, how long will it take to see results? That's a fair question. Remember, hair growth is slow. It grows about ½ an inch per month, sometimes less if your body is under stress. So you're not going to see instant results in a week or two. But what you will notice, often within a few months, is a reduction in shedding. That's the first sign your body is responding. Then, as your internal environment improves, you'll start to see new fine hairs, often called baby hairs, around the hairline or crown. Over time, those become thicker and stronger. This journey requires patience, but it's worth it, because you're not just reversing hair loss, you're restoring overall health. When you lower inflammation, improve circulation, and balance hormones, you're protecting your heart, your brain, your metabolism. Hair growth becomes a natural byproduct of healing your body. And that's why I keep stressing this point. Don't treat hair loss as a cosmetic problem. Treat it as a health signal. When you fix the signal, not only does your hair improve, but your entire body thanks you